So my name is Grace Atkins. I know most of you, many of you. I'm the user engagement librarian here at Ellis, and I also do a lot of work with open educational resources and open access, and Creative Commons fits into that in many, many ways. So today I'm going to be talking about Creative Commons, and we'll be covering the licenses and different ways you can find projects that have a Creative Commons license and different ways you can get a license. If you don't know what any of that means, that's totally fine because we'll start at the very beginning. But I want to know who everyone is and what brought you in here today, what your interest in Creative Commons is. So if we could just go around, and if people online could type in who they are and what their interest in Creative Commons is. Let's see a few chimes in. I'll go ahead and get started. So I have some slides today, but most of what I'll be going over is found on a guide, and we'll move over to that after I've wrapped up the slides. So we are going to cover what Creative Commons is. It's an organization, and they do work with providing these licenses. Get a little more into that. We'll talk about the licenses themselves, and when we move out of the guide, we'll work on finding materials with CC licenses that you can use. All right. And after these slides, we'll move over to how to actually find these materials, create projects with those materials, get a license for your own work or works, and then I want to end today by talking about how all of this fits into higher ed. So let's get started. Creative Commons is an organization that started in 2001 as a way to define copyright and make it a little more usable. Let's first just talk about kind of the state of things. There tends to be this false assumption that everything freely accessible online is okay to use. So if you can Google an image and find an image, you can use an image, right? Wrong. Just because something's freely available doesn't mean it's free to use. And of course, we're living in an age where we do a lot of mashups and we mix and remix things, but we don't always have permission to do that. Now, of course, copyright does come in. And copyright is automatic when a work is created in a tangible form. So actually, Erin, do you want to jump in and define that? Because we actually had a really long discussion about this, so not to put you on the spot, but tangible form, what does that mean?
Well, it means a lot of things. It has to be fixed. So if you just have an idea that you copyrighted, but if you write something down, you have to make it copyrighted. And digital media is actually a pretty complicated thing about fixed, but most schools like disagree with things that are servers somewhere that has to be fixed. So most of this is like a copyrighted, you know, when that language is still on the internet, it's not fixed, it's not written down.
Okay. So most things then do fall under copyright, and people can't just use them any which way if it's in that tangible form. So that's a really black and white distinction there. It's either under copyright, you absolutely can't use it in any way, or it's not under copyright and you can. But there's a lot of gray area in between. Oh, sorry, I'll try to repeat what people add. Erin gave us a definition of copyright. Tangible form can mean a lot of different things, but we talked about how that mostly means something fixed, something actually written down on paper. Class notes was the example she gave. And of course it gets complicated with things online, but we said something stored on a server usually is classified as a tangible form. So that was her response there. And I'll try to repeat anything that, yep. So copyright lasts for the life of the author plus 70 years at least, and more in some cases. I think Disney is kind of an infamous case of extended copyright. Scattered laughter. So copyright is a bundle of rights, and you can sign them away exclusively. You can also grant non-exclusive licenses that give multiple people permission to use a work for different purposes. So it's pretty, there's not a lot of wiggle room there when you enforce copyright. So this is where Creative Commons licenses come in. They don't replace copyright, but they do work alongside it. So they apply to works that are subject to copyright, not to works that are already in the public domain. They offer an option for the creator to define permitted uses explicitly, and they do not affect fair use, which is a whole other complicated thing to unpack. A really basic definition of that is using something for educational purposes, for nonprofit educational purposes, most of the time falls under free use or fair use. But Creative Commons licenses, it doesn't really matter if it's under Creative Commons license. They're not exclusive, which is really nice depending on where you publish your work. And they allow for copying, distribution, display, public performance, and reformatting. And like I said, they don't replace or contradict copyright. They just help define it a little further. What do I mean by that? And I think it's pretty obvious why you would use that, because everything is copyrighted automatically, but you might want a little more wiggle room in there with your rights. You might have uses that you find acceptable and you want people to know about, but you don't want to sign all of your rights away. And then it can just get so complicated with time, money, effort. You want to be able to articulate your uses at no cost. So the attributes of these licenses, I know these symbols are really tiny, but has anyone seen these before? If you do a lot with Creative Commons licensing, or if you do a lot with Creative Commons licensed material, you'll see a variety of arrangements of these different icons. So the core pieces of a Creative Commons license are attribution, non-commercial, no derivative works, and share alike. So what does that look like? These are the combinations you'll see. I know they're really small, but I'll pull them up a little bigger when we're actually in the Creative Commons website. Attribution provides for all kinds of uses, including derivative works. Attribution is just saying that you can use my work as long as you give me credit. That's the most basic Creative Commons license. Attribution is a piece of all Creative Commons licenses. It's always present. If you add the $ with the slash through it, and in other countries it's whatever their commerce is with the slash through it, which is kind of funny because I was looking for things in other countries and I saw like a yen sign with a slash through it, and it's like, oh, that's their non-commercial license. That allows you to build upon and remix the content, but not for commercial purposes. So that means if you see a video and you want to edit it a bit and then sell it, that's not okay. You can edit it a bit, but you can't sell it. Attribution share alike, that's something that I see done a lot in the library world. It allows for building upon and remixing the work, even for commercial purposes, but the user must also license their work as share alike. So that guarantees that even if whatever you've created, let's say again a video, is used over and over, you want it to continue to be freely available. And with each remix, you want other people to be able to build off of that. So I think that's cool that as a creator, you have control of it, even in remixed form that way. You can keep it going on. Attribution, no derivatives. That means it can be shared. You want people to give you credit, but you don't want them to remix it or edit it in any way. Let's see. Attribution, non-commercial, no derivatives. That's the most restrictive. So you want people to use it, give you credit, but they can't remix or make money. And then finally, the last combination, or the last core combination, is building upon and remixing, but not for commercial purposes, and you want the same license to be applied each time it's remixed. So those are combinations you'll see a lot. Usually when people use the graphic next to their license, they'll also have a link that goes to the page that explains all of this. And the nice things about Creative Commons is they have really, really detailed websites that go into the legalese of all of this, but they also have some very straightforward pages that explain this in a really clear way. So it's very easy to understand copyright. Those are the slides I have on these licenses, and I want to move into actually exploring this stuff and giving everyone else a chance to explore it. I covered that pretty quickly. I feel like a lot of people in this room are somewhat familiar with Creative Commons though. Any questions or anything to add to my explanation of the licenses? Okay, well go ahead, and if you have any questions at any point or you want to add something, please feel free to interrupt at any time. Go to libraryguides.missouri.edu/Creative Commons. Sounds good. Okay, great. All right. So if everyone's on the guide, I have a box that links to more information about Creative Commons and what it is as an organization. But what I would like to do at this time is scroll down to the how can I find work that I can use and start actually searching through Creative Commons. I'm going to pull up. We'll go into how to get your own license next, but I want you to be able to see some examples of people who have done this. So who has ever gone through the Creative Commons search function before? Have 3 hands, some people haven't. Looking at the different places that the CC search can go through, such as Flickr, Google Images, Pixabay, YouTube, who uses at least one of these on a regular basis? Yeah, I'm assuming at least everyone uses Google Images some. So think about an image that you need for something. I'm going to be a little meta here and actually look for Creative Commons related images. And I'm going to go through Google Images, but pick whatever topic you want and choose whatever site you want to search on. Oh, you're right. Thank you. There we go. And let me go back one actually. So it asks you to specify, do you want something that you can use for commercial purposes? Do you want something that you can modify, adapt, or build upon? I'm going to say I just want to use it as is, and I don't want to use it in any way for profit. So I'm going to uncheck those boxes, and that's going to broaden my results. And now I have access to all of these different logos that I can use. We did use some of these on our social media to promote today's workshop. You can also do this through Google Images itself. It has these different ways to search, but you can also start through the Creative Commons search. Did you follow that okay, Hannah? No? All right. Sorry, all of you at home. Does anyone have something in mind that they actually, like a project or anything, or a poster or presentation in mind while you're kind of looking through this?
I'm looking for aerials and agriculture fields.
Did you find anything good?
Nothing that I felt confident I could use.
Let's see. Aerials, agriculture. So I searched the same thing on Flickr, and regardless of whether or not these are usable for you. I think it's just a good example of, okay, now I've really narrowed down my search into things I can actually use potentially. When I pull one up on Flickr, it's always in the corner down here. Do you see where it says some rights reserved? And when you click that, it's going to take you out to explaining what those symbols mean. So in order to use this image from Flickr, if I were using it in a presentation, if I were using it in a paper, what have you, you see there's a person icon and a circle icon. The person is attribution, you need to give credit, and the circle arrow is share alike. If you remix, transform, or build upon the material, you must distribute your contributions under the same license as the original. Sometimes they will specify under that exactly how they want it to be credited, what kind of citation format they want you to use. This one it doesn't, which means that you would just follow whatever style you're using for whatever kind of work you're doing. At the very least, they usually want the person's name, a link back to the work, any information you have to give them credit. There is a best practices guide for attribution. Yeah. So the link for this can be found on this Creative Commons guide. It's a box in the bottom right-hand corner at attributing and citing CC sources. And this is from the Creative Commons wiki that has really in-depth information about all things Creative Commons and Creative Commons licenses. I think it's pretty easy to follow the ideal attribution: title, author, source, license. And if you don't have all that information, you just attribute as best you can. Any questions there? So the CC search feature is something I'd have bookmarked on my computer. It's just a really easy way to find images. I use it mostly for images. You can use it for video, music, and other types of media as well. And then, of course, there are different search engines, different databases, different things that also have Creative Commons licenses and ways to search it. So depending on what you're in, if you start seeing those same icons, you know you're looking at Creative Commons type of material. So that is finding. Any questions on finding and citing? Let's look at licenses then. From that main guide, it's the middle box. How can I share my work? Get a Creative Commons license. And I know when I first heard about Creative Commons and started using it, I thought, oh, I'm going to have to fill out a form or email someone or submit and get this approved. And you just do it. You just figure out what kind of protection or rights that you want to enforce, and then you articulate those. And if you go and click on their Get Started, they just asked 2 questions. So have something in mind, like what I have in mind here is if I made a video that I wanted to share. And I would like that video to be shared, and I would like for others to share in the same way if they remix in any way. And I don't want any commercial uses of my video. So by checking those 2 boxes, they said that the license I need is an attribution, non-commercial, share alike 4.0 international. And you can click on it to find out more about exactly what that means. But I think that's such an easy way. I didn't even have to scroll and read a bunch of definitions. I just answered 2 questions, and it told me what my combination of symbols and words that I need to include on my license. So what that looks like when you actually make that, some of the things that the library has done have been remixes of other libraries. Let me try that again. Right, it's going to correct me. Apologize. Here we go. So we have an avoiding plagiarism tutorial, and you can see here in the corner a little Creative Commons license. This tutorial was adapted from the Simon Fraser University Library and the University of Southern Mississippi Library. And the Creative Commons license is Attribution Non-Commercial Share Alike 3.0. So that tells you where they got it, that provides the attribution, and then it says that if you want to now take this plagiarism tutorial, use it at your own library, change it around a bit, you can do that. You just have to also use the same type of license so that people can continue to work off of it. I think I tend not to notice these so much, and now that you know about it, you might see them everywhere because more and more things are using Creative Commons licenses. I have the numbers on that. It's pretty amazing how much it's jumping every year, how much Creative Commons content is out there, and how much is being used. So that is actually getting a license. Pretty simple, pretty standard, and all of the links to that are on this guide. Any questions on getting a license? Sitting here today, does anyone have something in mind that they think now they want to put a license on, that they're working on? Yeah. I saw that Felicity was on, but I think she just got off because she could definitely answer a most-based question like that. How does our institutional repository come into play with something like Creative Commons? Do you know? Yeah.
I mean, it's all nice but I do think that was something that I was interested in after the relationship period. But I just didn't, I can remember what exact lessons you get when you upload it. That's what I did.
Well, and Creative Commons is non-exclusive, so depending on what our rules are, they can work side by side. I will have to look into that, and I should add a box about that to this guide. This is a new guide, so based on what I hear from everyone today, I'll be adding and changing things. That's a good question. I wanted to pull up the National Association of College Stores, so think like bookstores. They had a webinar not too long ago talking about how Creative Commons comes into play with OER in higher ed, open educational resources. Those are works or materials that you can use in a classroom that are free to students. So a lot of the time, those are also under Creative Commons licenses, like OpenStax textbooks. Those are under a Creative Commons license. And they had some interesting information on here that I wanted to share. And they also put a Creative Commons license on this presentation. So as long as I say who did it, I can use it, which is pretty cool. Let's see. I liked the graphic they used, or the words they used to explain there that open is not necessarily free, but it's better than free because it includes the permissions type of stuff. And I also like what they had to say there about the legal rights of using a license, how you can retain, reuse, revise, remix, and redistribute, and how retain is so fundamental because you don't want to lose your work to someone else. And if you use a Creative Commons license, or if you use that and make something open as an open educational resource, you'll always be able to retain that. I think something important that maybe I didn't talk about when we were talking about licenses is they are irrevocable. So if you choose to use a Creative Commons license, you can't go back on that. If someone shares alike or whatever and you want to change your mind and change your license, you've already decided. So you have to be pretty sure, because it is somewhat binding, which I think makes sense. You don't want people changing the rules all the time, and then people would have to take down their remixes and stuff like that. But what I wanted to share here, I really liked this graphic. This is what I wanted to share. Looking at the different types of restrictions you can put on something and where that falls into an open educational resource. So with the most freedom, just like this set of slides, just saying you have to attribute it and you can do anything else you want, that's as free as you can get with a license. And then if you go all the way down to the bottom, when it's restricted, then it's a shareable work, but it's really not an open work anymore. So I think that was cool for putting it in perspective with higher ed. But we talked a little bit, and then, yeah, in 2015, CC licensed works were viewed 136 billion times online. And you can see that was in 2006 only under 20 million. So Creative Commons has really taken off, and I think that makes a lot of sense because we do see so many things now reworked and made so quickly. I think there's a graphic that's floating around out there that's like the internet content that's made and published online in one day is more than like all images up until this point in history. I mean, it's just astounding how fast people are making things. So it makes sense that you can articulate what you want people to respect in terms of sharing without having to have these conversations. I know that even when I was starting out in libraries, if I saw someone else had a cool video or a cool guide or something, I would reach out to the creator and say, hey, can I use it in this way? Can I take the whole thing? Can I do this or that? And that worked fine. I mean, that usually we had some kind of agreement, but it's so much quicker to just see, okay, we don't even have to talk about this. Like, I can just run with it. So Kelly was talking about how a lot of the things in special collections are in the public domain pre-1923, so it would be handy for them to be able to say that. I know something with Creative Commons, you could have something that says it's in the public domain, you can use it, and you don't need a Creative Commons license, but I know that you guys will also kind of like rework things. Like you make GIFs out of special collection stuff. Yeah, which was really cool. But so then, like, to rework something in the public domain, then you would definitely want a Creative Commons license to articulate how you want that shared or not. Anyone else, how does this play into their work?
Guys use the module optimize it's good to our page, you know, like everything.
Yeah.
So look at it like
That's really cool that Creative Commons is embedded in LibGuides. I think that's neat. I think that's happening more and more. On the Creative Commons website, they have a pretty cool section that talks about different industries and different companies that are kind of adopting Creative Commons and just standardizing it, making it a standard practice in what they do. There's a study that's being conducted right now to see how for-profit businesses are using Creative Commons, because even though it plays really well into open stuff, we can see here you can still use Creative Commons and not necessarily be sharing well. I phrased that a little funny, but when that comes out, I'll be really interested to see what their findings are there and how places that make money still incorporate Creative Commons on their content. I wanted to ask some questions of you all about, specifically at Mizzou, like, I know the libraries, we can provide support in getting a license, we can provide support in understanding Creative Commons more. Something I've been kind of toying around with, I'm the liaison for digital storytelling, And I was thinking about maybe talking to the faculty about making that a component in their assignments, because I asked about what do students do when they make their videos, like what happens next. And they always give them the option of storing it in our institutional repository. There's a lot of really good reasons for that. And if the students choose not to do that, then they just have it up on their own portfolio, but they don't define their copyright any further than that. So I thought it might be good to have them have a practice of, and the final part of your assignment is to make sure you have a license on this if you want it. I think that's something that could be cool for that kind of work. And I think that more and more departments are starting to have less white paper assignments, more, oh, I don't know, like the class all makes a wiki. Well, you could have a Creative Commons license on that wiki so that you can have some control over how it's shared. Any other thoughts on, if the university should do more faculty student? Yeah. I don't know. Oh, do you know?
That's our policy of everything we produce.
Okay.
And it tends to be mostly video. But, it's like for 10 years that I've been here, one of the first things I was instructed, I always put a copyright statement on anything that we do.
And does that just make it totally unshareable then? Or what does that do?
It establishes some sort of claim on that material without the cost of a legal copyright. It still establishes some ownership to the producer
Okay.
or to that entity that's mentioned. In this case, curated for the university.
Do you want to jump in here, Aaron? Is it related to this? Oh.
Open curriculum act that the school is trying to pass. We actually, if we go policies on our website, I think things done by students, we can contact for students. Things done by employees, according to this policy on the website, are much better and cover it from students. However, there is a case with some national teachers used to, some organizations a few years ago tried to get copies of all teachers' curriculums to like evaluate, and the university sued. Well, they sued the university, and the university won, but the university's stand in that case was that the professors were looking copyright, and they can't enforce the copyright. So we're kind of with a schizophrenic approach to copyright here, like when some policies is required, but in that case, at least we should be.
So I'm hearing that, and now I'm looking at our page with a plagiarism tutorial, and we have the Creative Commons license on the tutorial, and then at the bottom of the page, we have the standard copyright thing. So what am I even looking at now?
Well, if you don't establish copyright and enforce it, then there can be the argument, the presumption that it's available to people. An example, Capitol sorority, my wife used to work with, and they had people using the KD letters, and they weren't licensed to do that. And if they did not enforce that as soon as they found out about it, then there's a legal presumption that, oh, it's okay to do it because you didn't enforce it. It's not a real black and white world to me.
Well, then it seems like this is a really good example of how Creative Commons and copyright go hand in hand. Because then how I can, if I were someone outside of the university, how I would view this is copyrighted, but you're allowed to share it in some ways, which is what we want this page to communicate, right?
I think what you've done is you've established another level of management of that material. You've got the copyright on there, and then you've got the Creative Commons license. So, you know, a lawyer is going to tell you just get as much protection as you can. And I think you've established another layer of that.
That's pretty cool. I like Creative Commons. Yeah.
It's something like
No, I think that's an interesting thing to think about because I'd kind of gone blind to that copyright thing at the bottom of every web page. So, yeah. Oh, okay. Okay. So was that this bottom one here, the most restrictive, I think? Yeah. So it's, oh, right, sorry. So if that's the most restrictive, that is the best place to start, you know, and then like you said, they give you the option of you can lessen that a bit depending on how shareable you want it to be. That's pretty cool. Oh, that's 3.0? Creative Commons is on version 4.0. It hasn't really, at its core, it's very, very similar. It's just, it's the really, really in-depth legalese that gets updated as time goes on. But these pretty core conditions of attribution, share alike, non-commercial, no derivatives, that's been pretty consistent throughout its founding. I wonder a little about, I was going to ask if anyone has any predictions about kind of where this type of stuff will go, especially keeping in mind this chart. I think the people who started Creative Commons in 2001 had a lot of foresight and I think received some criticism of like, oh, you're being paranoid, information sharing is not going to take off like that. And then it did, and thank goodness they had so much in place and were able to kind of adapt and run with it. But I don't know, any insight into copyright or Creative Commons trends?
Combining APIs to access.
Yeah, definitely. Here's a good graphic talking about the key fields that Creative Commons licenses come into play. Open data, I think, is a big one if you're talking about APIs and things like that, as well as technology. Yeah, and I think I tend to focus so much on images just because that's the kind of work I do, and then also videos, tutorials, those sorts of things. There's a lot out there in terms of music, that kind of stuff, but also like coding. You know, you can get a Creative Commons license on a piece of code, and I think things like that, because that's always been such a gray area, because good coders steal. And now it's like, okay, you can steal with permission. So I think you're right that it's going to really take off in that field. The government's using Creative Commons licenses more and more, which I think is pretty cool to see. NASA has, I don't want to say all because that's probably not right, but a huge image archive, including its logos, are under Creative Commons so that you can use them in certain non-commercial ways, which is pretty awesome, I think. But they're doing that more and more because the government does have massive data sets and also just cool content. I'm pretty sure that the National Parks database is, a lot of their images are Creative Commons. So we're seeing it more and more. But I'm kind of hoping that in education it'll be something that's taught to students, because I know there's a lot of talk about how we're in a gig economy now, that people are working gigs instead of jobs. A lot of more people are freelance. So you're going to want really good control over your portfolio. You're going to want to share your work in order to get those jobs, but you'll want to retain your rights over your work.
One reason so much of that government material is under Creative Commons is that we pay for it.
Yeah, that's a good point. Any other insight into any of these fields? How does that even work?
I went to a trademark seminar, and there were a couple of attorneys there, one from Disney, and they showed a film where it was a documentary, and a person in the background was walking past the subject being interviewed. The person in the background had a t-shirt with Mickey Mouse on it. The Disney lawyer said, "You can't use it. You got to pay us for it." That's right. The other attorney says, no, that's fair use. You can use that. And the point was, is that's what it comes down to. Who's got the better law?
Wow.
You know, and where that particular judge, where his or her head won't be at that time. So that's why I say it's hard to find a real black and white line on some of these issues.
Well, something I think we see in doing work with social media is it's so fast-paced, it's so ephemeral. We're not going to put a CC license on every GIF we share when we're sharing like 8 a day. So what do we do there? In our own policy, in our library policy, we say social media is a gray area, and we're keeping in line with what the university does as a whole, and we're keeping in line with those policies. And the social media team makes sure that we're on top of those policies if they change. But in the meantime, we're pretty lax about copyright and attribution on social media because that's just how it works right now. But if it ever starts to get more locked down and more restricted, I don't know who would be enforcing that, but
Yeah, the way it's much better is hardware.
yeah,
You know, yes, there's a digital fingerprint.
right.
That you can use to track it and identify.
And I think sites like Giphy or different meme sites or ImageFlip, they help by, I guess just kind of grounding certain images. Like, if you found it there, at least you can go back and say where you found it, versus where you found it today might disappear tomorrow, you know. But if it's in a database or a data set, it's at least somewhere. Even if that's not where it was originally, at least it's somewhere findable again. Well, that is pretty much all I have on Creative Commons. Anything you would like to see added to the guide? Let me go back to it. I have links out to other guides we have for the library about related things like copyright, like open access.
I just find myself wondering that on the material we're producing, not in our office, that we should not add those logos along with the copyright. You know, at the end of the piece, we always have a copyright piece, and whether or not we should have some sort of creative commons statement on the actual video.
Across the board or on certain projects and certain content?
Well, depending on how we want to treat it, you might have a variation of that, but yeah, kind of across the board.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially depending on the purpose and the goal, like NCSU's library has a really cool set of videos. And they put theirs under Creative Commons. And they have the license down here that you can edit it. So at another institution I worked at, we used these same videos, and at the very end of the video where they have their own logo, oops, I don't want the words, sorry. Where they have their own logo, we just replaced it with University of Texas Libraries. So then, yeah, see how it says Ask Us and CSU Libraries? We could, because of how they did the Creative Commons license, it said University of Texas Libraries. So we could take that exact same content and, I mean, not make it look like ours, but just remind the students at the end to ask the library, like not to reach out to this library, but to reach out to their own library for help with that particular research thing. So the reason I talked to them about it, because I did reach out anyway, and I said, you know, just to be clear, like, we're doing this, it's in line with the license, and they said, good, because we want to have the best videos in this area, and we want every library to use these videos, but know that we did it. So with their goal of kind of cornering the market on the best video about where research articles come from, part of their strategy was if we do make this shareable, if we do allow people to have some, put their own branding on it, they're more likely to use it. So I thought that was interesting that in kind of giving up some of their rights, they were achieving the goal of being the expert on this. So I think it's cool that you don't have to see it as being totally selfish to share in this way. Like, it can be self-serving too, depending on what your goal is. Do you think that that will be a thing then with university videos? Do you think they might be interested in adding Creative Commons license to the basic copyright?
Considering that so much of our material, and I mean, not just our office, but the university as a whole, winds up on YouTube, and you know, anybody can download that and then do what they want with it. Again, I don't know how you stop that, but at least we do, you know, we do establish some sort of plan to it.
Right.
And if you were inclined to try to stop it, that would give you, you know, that would give you some standing. I mean, we've seen material that we've produced used in ways that we weren't happy with at all.
No.
I produce on my own software tutorial that I put on YouTube, and then I see them somewhere else on a paid site.
That's not right.
You know, you have to get a subscription to it, and I say, that's my tutorial. I'm getting nothing.
Well, and that's where it comes down to this 5 R's of legal rights. You want to be able to retain those rights. And we are out of time. Sorry, Gwen. Thank you all.
This was very good.
Thank you.